What's going on, everybody? Princeton Clark here, your host for the Evolved Mastery podcast, and I'm excited to be back, guys, with another segment of Mastery 360, and I have a very special guest that's going to be joining me today. His name is Heath Cummings. He's the host of the Live This Life podcast. He's also an amazing father, husband, community leader, and world changer. I'm truly excited to introduce you guys to Heath, but I wanted to apologize, man. I had some problems with my RSS feed. I hadn't been able to upload new podcasts, and I have some backlogged episodes that I need to get up, but I'm going to be getting those up this week. Also got some new stuff coming your way, a new segment called Real Talk. So make sure you subscribe, make sure you're leaving a review so that you can always be in the know with what's going on the Evolve Mastery podcast. But listen, guys, I'm not going to talk too much right now. Like I said, I got a lot that I want to give you guys, and there's some announcement that I'm going to be coming back on the back end with following the interview. But like I said, today's podcast, I'm interviewing a great friend of mine, and I'm just truly excited for him to share his story and to just be on this podcast with him, because he's had me on his podcast twice, and his podcast is phenomenal. It's reaching all over the world. And so it was about that time. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So sit back, grab a drink, grab something to eat, a snack, whatever you need, and we're going to have a great conversation today. Let's go. What's going on, guys? You're tuned into another episode of Mastery 360 on the Evolved Mastery podcast, and I am your host, Princeton Clark. And as I said prior to coming into this episode, I got a special guest with me today, guys. Great friend, a brother in this journey of mastery. And, you know, we've connected years ago. I guess been about 3 years at this point?
About 3 years, yeah.
But guys, I want to introduce you guys to someone so special in my life. And, you know, the way that we connected, there was so much synergy from the beginning. And his name is Heath Cummings. Brother, it's so good to have you on the show today, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing awesome, man. I'm glad to finally be on your show. I've had you on mine twice, and I know you're a busy dude. I'm pumped that you got the podcast going back on, and here I am on it to sort of grace the presence in your world, man. It's been an awesome journey. It's been, like Princeton said, you know, there's certain people that you can call sort of a brother, someone that you're close to. But really, I feel like Princeton is probably one of the closest people in my life, other than my actual brother, to being someone who is like my brother. You know, we vibe so closely. The first time we ever chatted, I was on vacation, and I had seen this video of you talking about the power of the now moment. I'll never forget that, because I always think in my life, what would have happened if I didn't just happen to be scrolling through Facebook stories at that time and just come across this guy who was just dropping this knowledge bomb. And because my life has completely shifted ever since I met you, man. I tell you that all the time about how much my life has completely transformed since the moment we connected. So, and that just happens. You can just be fortunate enough where you cross paths with those people that have that kind of impact like you have.
Man, well, people like you make it easy to have that type of impact. You know, anybody who knows me, those out there in podcast land know that when I hit hard, because I genuinely love people, and the content that I put out from the time my life has changed coming into this moment, you know, it's always been with one sole purpose, and that's to awaken people to their power, purpose, and potential. Because if it hadn't been for what I had experienced and growing through that process and actually knowing what that felt like, I wouldn't have the impact that I have right now, you know. But to meet other people like you, you know, and to watch your journey, we're going to dive into that in a second, but to watch your journey from the time that we connected to where you are now. Guys, you heard him mention his podcast. It's the Live This Life podcast. And I've been a guest on there twice, but I mean, the way that he's bloomed like this lotus flower right before my eyes has just been so amazing. And you've had some amazing doors open up for you. But you know what? I'm going to stop, because I have this tendency to celebrate you every time we talk. And I want you to speak, because I want them to know why I love you as much as I do, and why, you know, I'm so inspired by people like you, and I'm grateful to have someone like you in my life. But, you know, Mastery 360 is all about bringing on people from different walks of life who've had to surrender to their own power, purpose, and potential, who've had to grow and who've had to evolve through their own mastery. And so a lot of people see where you are now. I want you to share a little bit with the audience. Who is Heath Cummings? Where did your journey begin?
I mean, defining who I am is always an ongoing process. So to say who I am today is going to be completely different from where I am in a week from now, But the journey, an abridged version of it, so you can kind of get into the good stuff later on. But I mean, my journey it really began when I was changing into adulthood and I had to figure out where I was going to go in this world with a career. And I was always that kind of guy that stood up for the little guy. It was kind of something that I've discovered in the last few years. Like, what was the common theme of my life? What is the common thread that has sort of sewn the fabric of my life? And it was always trying to stand up for the little guy. And that's what motivated me to go into the career path that I was in for 18 years, which was law enforcement. And I sort of found out early on, I didn't exactly want to go into that. I had a family friend who kind of like funneled me into that. I thought it sounded cool. I did my first little thing and got into a cruiser and rode around with somebody. And I was like, yeah, man, this is great. And, a few years in, I realized that it might not have been for me. I mean, I was like, I've heard you tell your stories about, the kind of rambunctious person you had been in the past. And I mean, when
Hellion.
people Hellion, I'm trying to be polite, but first few times that people saw me in uniform, they're like, really? Like, yeah, I know. We don't have to go there. I know. But I guess it wasn't true to who I really was to a certain point, because I've always had a big mouth. I've always been somebody who, if I see something that's not right, I'm going to say something. And when I discovered that in that career path, I discovered very quickly that's going to create a lot of adversity for me. And early on, when I was about 23 years old in that career path, I stood up for some stuff that I didn't like, and I got into a huge legal battle. And fortunately, like a lot of other times I've hit adversity, when I stand up, I do it for the right reasons, knowing I have a fight to fight. And the people who I had to stand up against ultimately fell. They ultimately were moved on from their positions, no longer in a position of power to victimize people. So that was my first experience in that career path. And I sort of, at that point early on, I was already, well into all the training, well into a ton of experience. I was 23 years old training other people that were 10, 15 years older than me. I'd really taken to it quick. But I got into art crime investigation. I went into a specialized area of cultural property protection and quickly became somebody who was well known across the country. If you Google my name and look up art crime, I was involved in a major FBI art crime case. It was a cool experience. I had a lot of great experiences that, but still, I was still dabbling into the law enforcement field, and ultimately I came across even more adversity. And it was like the same type of lesson all over again. I found myself as the typecast person who was blowing the whistle, and of course the hammer got dropped down on me. And I came out the victor again in that situation, but I ultimately realized, like, I am meant for something greater than just doing this. I need to be in a place where my influence can be from the decision-making standpoint so that I can really affect this. Like, yeah, it's great to call out the people who aren't doing great things when you see it, but I felt like maybe I got a little bit lucky through all those circumstances that I came out as the victor. So ultimately, I walked away from law enforcement. It was the same year that you and I connected.
Yeah.
And when you and I connected first, I was like, I'm absolutely miserable, Princeton. You're talking about moving in your power. And I feel like I've always been a very confident person. I've been a boxer since I was like 14 or 15 years old. So you throw the cop thing, the boxer thing. I was into like SWAT stuff and everything. You throw that type A kind of guy, and I'm not a small guy either. You get a very confident type person, but I'm like, I don't feel like I have the power. You're talking about moving in your power all the time. And I feel like I have none because I'm not living a life that I feel like is up to my fullest potential. And, it was a lot of your guidance that was just kind of like, you need to just listen to your heart. You need to put yourself in a space where you can figure out what that person really is. Who do you want to be? What it is that you want to do? And eventually that moved me away from the law enforcement world. I completely retired and I moved into politics. And I actually became one of the elected officials in my town. It's a mayoral board. Instead of one mayor, there's a mayoral board of, it used to be 3, now it's 5. We just changed it. And I shifted into politics. And it was right around the time when I had only been on the elected board for about a year when the George Floyd incident came in. And as a direct result of that, I mean, I'll dive into that real quick because that is still a hot topic. I don't feel like it might not be in headlines because they're not trying to push the narrative right now, but I think it's still a huge issue regardless of where, the newspapers and CNN tend to think it is, So I immediately jumped right into creating police policy because that is my responsibility. The police department and its chief has to report to me. So in that turn of events, I'm there creating policy about body cameras. I'm creating policy about a duty to act if you see an officer acting in excessive force. Significant police reform policies that now will shape my community, and it shaped other communities wanting to follow suit. When they heard all those things, saw the newspaper headlines on the policies that were changing, they sort of jumped on board. So that's how you affect the change. Now, I wish when I had that conversation with you first in 2018, it was like, hey, dude, you need to just leave and go into politics. And I'd be like, okay, cool. It took me a long time to even get there because I said I was never going to be in politics. That was something I never had in the cards. And I'm not still wholeheartedly convinced that's where I'm going to be going in the future. But for the time being, I've found a purpose with what I've done in the past toward where I'm sort of needed in this world right now. But then, your inspiration and a few other key people as far as the whole podcast thing too, in the midst of that all, someone dared me like, you should do a podcast because it scares you. And I decided to do it a few episodes and it started to catch on. And now, it's become a whole thing. But I guess that's the short, condensed version leading up into where I'm at with the podcast. That whole thing has been amazing. And I really didn't know where I was going to take it. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. In the midst of all that stuff I just told you, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I had cancer once at age 26 and again at age 29. Throughout all those years of the police stuff, I ended up dealing with 12 or more suicide incidents on this one particular bridge, this huge bridge that's in our area. It's picturesque, it's beautiful, and I just happened to be one of the unlucky people who had time after time encountered people who had either already gone over, were in the process of it, or I was able to actually talk them down or physically get people down. And those really took a toll on me. I had a lot of PTSD from a couple of very key incidents that were very graphic. I won't get into them, but it was a lot to get over on top of the fact that, surviving cancer twice and all the other things I encountered, having these constant battles, worrying that someone's going to be coming after you and your livelihood and your job because you've stood up for something that you believe in from time to time. So, the point of my podcast in the beginning was just to tell a little bit of my story, just to number one, get out there and prove that I could actually do it, because it did scare me to get out there as such a private person through all those years. Just say like, I can get out there, I can share my story, and I'm no weaker of a person admitting that I've had these problems and issues. But then once it started to catch on, I really found a platform to talk about the spirituality that I talk about, to the mastery of the now moment. I read The Power of Now for the first year on the podcast. I partnered with Namaste Publishing, and they were able to give us the rights to the book. So we read Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now, and it was huge. And actually, I'll back up a little bit. I read that years ago, many years before I'd met you. But then when you talked about the whole Power of Now, I started following you more. It brought it all back to me, which is exactly why I had to read it on my show. So that was just, and now the show is caught on. It's in 80-something countries, 85, 90 is probably somewhere around there. Just got picked up by Amazon Music. So, the thing just constantly keeps on building that snowball momentum. And it's like you always say, when you're moving with something that's aligned with your purpose, nothing can stop you. Nothing's going to get in your way. And sometimes it's moving even a little too fast for me because things are coming at me faster than I can deal with, on top of the political career, which is only a part-time gig. I have a full-time gig on top of it all that pays the bills. So, on top of being a husband and a father too. So, there's a lot of stuff going on, but I like the busyness because I'm feeling like I'm finally finding a purpose that was truly meant for me. And, like you even say in your book, that takes a lot of time. You were fortunate enough to discover that early on, but you have to give yourself that time to figure out what your purpose is sometimes. And it may take longer than you've planned, but ultimately, if you're there and you're looking, it's going to come to you and you're going to find it.
So much wisdom just in that. But, as you were talking, man, and you shared kind of an extended version of the process of growing from being that masculine macho man, just like I was at one point, to then evolving through being a police officer, to going into politics, your battle with cancer and still trying to be strong. Your entire journey was a typical man's journey, trying to be strong, trying to show up and prove that I'm a man, and that I can work my way through this, only to come to this point in your life where you realize, wait a minute, I don't have to be this way.
Right.
Matter of fact, being this way doesn't make me happy. And if it doesn't make me happy, guess what? It's going to affect my work. It's going to affect my ability to relate to my son, my ability to relate to my wife. All these different things are coming up to you at once. And it's kind of all coming to a head at once. And it's because at some point in your journey, you had been seeking, And so to piggyback off of what you just said, because there's a lot in there that I want to hit on, but I really just want to talk about the importance of being a man in today's society, and still having the ability to be vulnerable, to be open, to be soft, because that's true strength. And a lot of times when it is in reference to men, you don't hear that a lot, or you don't hear it enough.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of men out there who are suffering mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, because they're so busy trying to be strong. And they wonder why life keeps hitting them and hitting them and hitting them and hitting them. And it's because life, as I've learned, as you've learned, is trying to break you free. It's trying to break you free from the lie that you've assumed, this lie, this facade that you've played, this role that you've been playing in the movie of your life for so long. And that's why that breaking continues to happen, because life will chip at you and chip at you and chip at you until finally you come tumbling down. But what rises from that experience is a true essence of what you were meant to be. And I think that's what was happening when you and I connected. It was like you had just gone through this huge tumble and everything was reforming before your eyes. And it was like, who am I to step into this? Like, what am I, like, when you heard me speak, I remember us talking the first few times, it's like, dude, like, where did you come from? Like, how do you speak and talk like that, like, and own that power all the time? And you were hungry, you were searching. And so I know we have a lot of men that listen to this podcast as well as women, but for my men that are out there, what was one of the biggest challenges you feel you had during that pivotal moment in your life as it pertains to stepping into that power to impact change in your life and then going on to impact change in the lives of those in your community and in the world?
I think one of the biggest things that impacted me, one of the biggest lessons I could probably hand to anybody that I've learned on the backside of it all is patience. Because it was 2018, late 20, well, it was about like August of 2018 when you and I connected. Yeah. 2017 was my dark night of the soul. Like, I had a breakdown health-wise again, and I was going through a lot of stuff, and I actually had walked away from law enforcement that year and was going on a whole other side venture. And that ended up falling through, and I was left sort of holding an empty plate. Like, what am I going to do now? And then law enforcement roped me back in. It was a great position to be put as a school resource officer into schools in my kids' own school district. So it was wonderful. But I'm like, okay, well, I'm having a breakdown. This is my escape from this career path. And then I get roped right back into it. So I'm like, this isn't how it's supposed to work. I've heard these, these stories before, and something's wrong here. But that patience of, it was maybe my test to see if I was true to my word. Like, do you really want to get out of this? Have you really shifted your ego? Are you really approaching life in a different direction? And being that cop person, but having to do it in the eyes of a bunch of kids helped mold me in a different way. It softened my heart a bit, because there was that person who was in a uniform all the time. You weren't that. You were in like maybe a polo, maybe a shirt and tie, but you were a completely different person. And it was like a costume, really. It was like a costume shift, and it really helped. I think that definitely helped soften me up. So retrospectively, it was a great turn of events when I thought that it was like roping me back in. It couldn't have happened any other way, just like everything else that happens in your life. So the number one thing is just have that patience and realize that the divine timing of the stuff that's happening to you, you will see later, no matter how much you can't see it in the thick of that storm when the sun comes out. You will see the purpose of those things. I keep having it happen. I was talking to you before we hit record on the mic of what's happened to me this year. And I'm sure I'm going to see the value. I've already kind of seen the value in some of my struggles from this year already. So the other part that I think was one of the best pieces of sort of advice and revelation that I went through was, it doesn't matter how tough you think you are. It doesn't matter how tough you even are in other people's eyes, because, I've heard you get emotional on clubhouse rooms and stuff like that. And, you talk about your journey and just that raw emotion comes out, and I've heard you get teary and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't look at you any less or any strong than you are. I look at that like an amazing vulnerability, and that's a superpower in and of itself.
Yeah.
So when you think, as a tough guy, as a 6 foot, 230 something pound guy who's never been knocked down in a ring, you're like, I can't people see me cry. I'm not going to be tough anymore. It's like, you know what? I've been more vulnerable in the last couple of years on those podcasts that I've been on guest and my own. And I feel no less tough because of it. I feel more empowered because of it. I don't feel like I feel like I have more of a voice now, and I've probably been a little more mouthier now than I've ever been, in a respectful way, but I don't have to bite my tongue anymore because I'm afraid of what someone's going to think of me. And I've been into all the sort of spiritual concepts, the woo-woo stuff, the law of attraction things for years, but I've had no one to talk to about it except my wife, because my circle wasn't into that kind of thing. And if I brought it up, it was, I could be perceived as maybe less tough. I'm going to be a little more hippie, and that, it's your ego that's trying to make you feel tougher than everybody else. And what does it matter? As big as strong as you are, someone's always going to be able to knock you out, knock you down, do whatever physically. You got to build the backside of that and be strong on every angle, and being able to show your vulnerability and not care how quote unquote tough people think you are, especially us as men, that toxic masculinity that can set in. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you can shed and just become vulnerable. And you'll realize that when you show that sort of the underbelly underneath the turtle shell, you're able to actually see how much of a strong superpower that you actually have with that vulnerability.
I love that response, man. Especially, I can't get enough of talking about vulnerability, especially with men, because you're so right. It's something shifts in a man when he connects to that space within himself, to the point where, a lot of the times when a man is showing up and trying to present this image of being tough, it's because he wants to portray something to people, that's not true. Because when we're portraying that, we're hiding our insecurities, we're hiding our fears, our worries, our doubts, because we've been programmed to be that's tough. We got to be strong, but at the end of the day, it's like you said, when I'm able to show that vulnerability and I'm able to lean into that, there is nothing more powerful. There's nothing more liberating than to be 100% everything I was created to be, and to be able to share that with the world and not care what anyone thinks. Because I believe true agents of change, they have to be that way, because if the least little thing bothers you or gets to you or triggers you and stops you from moving or being vulnerable, it cuts you off from the divine. It cuts you off from source, God, universe, whatever pronoun, you use. It cuts you off, not that it's disappearing and it's disconnecting, but it cuts you off from your ability to go deeper. It cuts you off from a deeper level of yourself. And I think that's where so many men are stuck right now, because they're trying to put on this image. They wear a mask for everybody. They got a mask for colleagues. They got a mask for their wife. They got a mask for their children. They got a mask for their family, so on and so forth. But when they're by themselves, that's when all of the masks come off. I can't tell you how many times, even when I was in gangs and selling drugs and doing all that stuff, I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I had where I cried like a baby until I went to sleep finally. But nobody knew, because everybody was like, oh, man, Princeton crazy. Princeton's that guy, man. Man, Princeton, you see he pulled a gun on that guy? That's literally who I was. And so I was like a child lost in the wilderness. I didn't know my way home. And it took something like a failed suicide attempt to bring me back home, to realize that, wait a minute, I created this reality by choice. And that's something that you awaken to even in your own journey, is that I have a choice to live this life, which is what birthed, your podcast, which, guys, the Live This Life podcast is a phenomenal podcast. If you're not following it, you need to go over there. I'm putting the plug in now. I know we're going to mention it at the end of the podcast, but, you guys rarely hear me endorse anybody, but this guy right here, I'll endorse him every day, all day, every chance I get, because it's one thing to get behind someone and cheerlead for someone, you know, because of their title or their position or who they're connected to. It's another thing to cheer for someone because you genuinely love them and you see the work that they have put in, man. And you've put in a lot of work. I remember, you know, when we first connected and you were transitioning and you were like, I'm tired of this job. We talked about the police brutality and a lot of the injustice that was happening that you had been privy to and you had an opportunity to witness and even stand up against, that created all this drama around the issue, you know, with the chief, you know, at the time. And all this stuff happened, but you came out of it like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and you took the bull by the horns, literally, and was like, all right, you're not going to control me. I'm not going to live in fear anymore. I'm going to create change because I get to choose how I'm going to respond to the situation. And here we are now, you know, 3.5 or so years later, you know, and you're on the mayoral board, shifting and creating dynamic and strategic change in your area, and it's spreading like a wildfire because it's catching on. This is truly what people want. Mm-hmm. And through your own vulnerability, through your own ability to see how you were choosing to live your life, it opened up this space within you to show you how you could live a different life, create a different reality, you know, and become the hero of your own journey, and also for your wife and for your son. And it's just beautiful, man. It's beautiful, you know, but I want to dive back. I want to go back a little bit, you know, because you talked about, you know, going through your bouts with cancer and having to heal physically on top of trying to heal mentally and emotionally while still trying to carry the responsibility of being a man and be strong for those around you. You know, what was that like? You know, because I think a lot of times we hear the stories of, oh, they overcame cancer and, oh, they battled and they won. But we don't really know the story, like the challenges that came up with family and friends, or even just within yourself. You know, what was that like for you? I mean, not just going through it once, but going through it twice and then coming out on the other side. How did that change the way you saw your life and how you show up now?
It's definitely a unique two-part story with the cancers because they were really separate, and I was a different person for each one of them. You know, the first one, I was really sort of deep into doing so much like type A personality type stuff, just battle driven. And, you know, getting into all of my spiritual woo-woo stuff, you know, the body's got the chakra system. Well, that root energy, that survival energy is all down in your root, down in your pelvis. Well, that's where I ended up developing the first cancer. So, you know, once it happened, you think maybe that would mellow somebody out and maybe make them chill out a little bit. Nope. I just went the complete opposite direction. I'm like, cancer can't even stop me. What's up? You know, like there was a complete opposite, and I got worse. Mm-hmm. And so I got into stuff even more. You know, I'm like, cancer can't even slow me down. It was like within a few weeks, I was right back in the boxing gym. I was like ripping people. I mean, I was like just getting nasty on people in the boxing gym and stuff. It was the second one 3 years later. In that 3 years, I mean, we went almost to divorce. I mean, me and my wife have been together since we were 19 years old, and we've been together, it's 20 years this year. Mm-hmm. And we've been married for 16. I hope I got that right. But she was there through it all. And I mean, even she had her limit around that time, and I could see why. I became a very unbearable person. And then the second one hit. Same area, completely separate. It was unrelated. It would have shown up if the first one never happened. It was a completely different, more deadly type of cancer. Now, once that one hit, I made it through. So the first one, I've also got to throw a little bit of a disclaimer here that my course of treatment I wouldn't recommend for anybody. I was very, very lucky, and I took a very unconventional route. But the first one, I just went for surgery, and they didn't recommend. They said maybe you should get some radiation or chemo. I declined. The second one, and they also in that first case, they had told me I did not have cancer when they first found something. They were like, it's this condition, blah, blah, blah. It's no big deal. And it wasn't sitting right. My wife was 8 months pregnant, and she's like, do you want to meet your son? You should probably just get an ultrasound and see what's up. And I did, and it turned out to really be cancer. So that was my first taste of the medical industry really kind of pulling one over on me. Attribute it to just one bad doctor, maybe.
Yeah.
Then throughout the years of my 3 years in between the cancers, they over radiated me with CAT scans, which those are 3 or 4 years worth of radiation when you get one. They were putting me through 2 or 3 a year. So they think that is the reason why I came down with the second case. That again, the doctor was involved with a whole bunch of stuff. I won't get into that, but ultimately I came out of that second case very distrusting of the medical community, and they were like, you should definitely have chemo or radiation this time. And I went elsewhere for some alternative treatment to somewhere out of my area, some of the best cancer doctors in the world in Boston. And they were basically like, you need to not have any CAT scans ever again. Here's a completely, great regimen that you can get on for your diet. But here's all the things you can never eat again, diet sodas and all this stuff. So I went the unconventional route, and I got a lot more into my spirituality as a part of it. I went organic with everything. I went on a whole year of like alkaline diet and blueberries and kale and just all this stuff. And I got very lucky that without chemo or radiation, here I am 11 years later, and it's never come back. But it was at that breakdown after that second cancer is when all of the stuff finally came to fruition. What I had gone through, how close I came to death both times. Am I going to make it to 40 years old? And my doctors could not tell me yes or no. They just said, live every day of your life like it has meaning. And that is what ultimately carried me into where I am now, because it was all part of that awakening journey. So that second case is really what solved everything. I became I walked away from all the other stuff I was doing. I focused more on myself, my life, and my family. I had almost lost my family at that point in my life because I'd become unbearable, and my wife really wanted to walk away. I genuinely changed because she could see that it wasn't just a guy who was doing something to try and like mend things and fix the mistakes he made. He's like, you really become a new person.
Yeah.
And shifted into that whole new person, and that's radiated out for years after that. But that was what really, if that experience, which someone would say, my God, before 30 years old, you had cancer twice, that's a really hard circumstance. And I'll tell everybody who ever says that, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, because the guy that I was beforehand is not someone I'm proud of. I don't ever want to see him again. If I ever saw that guy in person, I'd give him a thing or two. But it was one of the best things that ever happened. It was one of the hardest, and I wouldn't want to do it again. But I wouldn't trade where I came from out of that experience for anything in this world, because I am so much happier with who I am and what's happened ever since then. And I don't think I would be in the same place if it weren't for that experience.
One phrase comes to mind: breakdown to breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think some of the greatest people in this world have all had stories like that, where they came to this pivotal moment of breakdown that broke them through to the truth of themselves. And it's something, it's like the saying, when you become conscious, when you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. It's something that happens at a deep level. And I love to kind of hear your thoughts on that, because I know for me, when I first woke up to the potential of what I could be, it was like, you really do become a different person. I think I became kind of unbearable for the people that I was around, which is why I had to isolate myself, because I was at this place where it's like, I just wanted them to feel what I was feeling. Like, I couldn't believe it. If you had asked me, a year prior, if ever thought something, or even a month prior at that time, if I ever thought a feeling that way was possible, I probably would have laughed at you or punched you in your face because you sound stupid. Like, like that's how I used to be. But, when you think about that breakdown to breakthrough and waking up to the truth of you, what is one thing that you feel that you've learned now in the truth of you that you wish you had known? What's one thing that you would have told a younger version of you?
I would have told the younger version of myself, don't worry about what other people think of you, because I let that dictate so much of who I was for such a long time. The high and tight haircut, you're always wearing like polos tucked in and like, always having to look super polished in a very like militaristic sort of way. And, you're at parties and you always got that scowl on. You're always like surveying the room. People would always tell me, like, you walk into a room, people would be kind of eyeballing you because you'd be eyeballing them. Like, I was that guy. I really was that guy. And it was for the sake of just being the toughest guy in the room. It was such an ego trip. And it wasn't ever who I was. When you talk to people that knew me from high school, they're like, you are more like yourself right now than you were just a few years out of high school. I graduated high school 6 months early in my senior year, and I graduated from police academy before we graduated from high school. Jeez. So we didn't even have our walk down. I had my diploma, but we didn't actually have our cap and gown ceremony until 2 weeks after I graduated from the police academy. So I was an 18-year-old kid with all of that experience and stuff. So I was force-fed that stuff from early on. But I would have, if I could have just told that young kid, like, don't lose you. And I've told this to a lot of some of my friends whose kids have moved on to law enforcement. That's the one speech I've given most of them. Do not lose you. Don't let this change you, because you're going to regret the years you've lost your true self to a job. And that goes for everybody listening to this show, is don't lose yourself for anyone. Be the truest version of you. Don't lose it for a love. Don't lose it for a job. You know, you go to the office and you got to put on a little bit different of a face. Keep as much as that face that you walked in the door with throughout your day as much as you can. And you're going to find that you just resonate with everything about your life so much more. But that young version of me, I wish I could just tell him, be you. Be you, because when you find you're going to lose you if you don't. And when you find him again, that's when you're going to truly be happy again. And that's probably the best piece of advice I could give to my son, anybody that I'm trying to teach something to. Don't lose yourself.
Yes. And, I think so. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's the problem with society today, is whether you become a police officer or a professor, or, you're working for McDonald's or whatever it is. Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in his book how we are domesticated from childhood. In the book, The Mastery of Love, he talks about how from the moment we're born, like, we are true, we are divine, we are powerful creators, and we wake up every single day. We don't judge anything. We're not measuring anything. We show up and we own our power. You look at, like, I have my little girl now who just turned 1, Kamaya, and that little girl owns her freaking power. You tell her she can't do something, guess what? She's going to try it. She's going to be relentless about it. You can take it, you can move it. She's going to she's relentless. Children have this relentless nature, and they don't care what anyone thinks. And people can try to say, well, it's because they don't understand. No, I think they understand more than we do.
Oh yeah.
I always say my kids are my greatest teachers, if we look at society, we see that a lot of the pain, a lot of the struggle, a lot of the challenges that people are experiencing, they're experiencing it because they're trying to live a life that's not true to them. Mm-hmm. They're trying to live a life that maybe their parents lived, or their father or their mother lived, or, whoever their major influences were. They're trying to create a life to receive some sort of validation for being here, and that is the huge trap, because that was my trap, getting lost in the need for validation because I never got it as a kid, and, you flip that. And what's awesome is I hear you and I hear that journey that you went on. And even though you had a huge ego, A-type personality, you still were aware enough to see injustice. You were still aware enough to see, okay, this is a problem. And if I'm going to be a jerk, I'm going to be a jerk to these guys. Like, I'm not going to be a jerk. There's enough jerks being jerks to these people. I'm going to be a jerk to these guys. Yeah. And you were like a major stone in a pond that created some major ripples, as a result of you showing up and being 100% you. And I say this to anybody listening to the podcast. If you believe that you have the power, potential, and purpose to create change in the world, understand that the change starts with your inner world first. If you want to make a change in the world, change your inner world. It's like the quote, if you change the way you see things, the things you see will change. And I know for you, like, watching how you shifted because you changed the way you saw. Because I remember when we first met and you were angry, like, you were pissed off. Yeah. And literally one conversation after another that we had, you softened more and more. You still held the message. You still held what I call that righteous indignation, against the injustice, against the problems facing humanity. But you found your peace in the midst of it. It's like finding the eye in the center of the storm. Mm-hmm. I think that's an attribute that world-changing leaders have, and I call that the main it factor that you need to be able to attain if you want to truly create change in the world, because the world is a stormy place. There's a lot of problems, there's a lot of issues that are going on, and if you truly want to impact the storms happening in humanity, you have to first impact the storm happening within yourself, so that as you walk into the storms that you've been gifted to impact, you can still have peace in the center of that storm without being impacted by it. And that's what you're a perfect example of, is how to find that peace within yourself. And yeah, there's going to be challenges, when you're in the storm. You might get pulled a little left and a little to the right, but because you have the divine conscious guidance system, you always come back to your center because you're doing the work consistently. And so I want to ask you now, because I know we're coming up on the end of the podcast, what were some things or some modalities or tools that you used to really help you find that center in your life?
It's a good recipe of things. Discovering meditation was probably the most pivotal. I am huge on meditation. I mean, I don't have a day that goes by. If I have one, it's, 1 or 2 a month that I have. It's sometimes an hour to 45 minutes a day, but that has allowed me to make connections to myself. That and journaling, because I find meditation almost like a dream state. We talk about brain waves. I'm huge into that science geeky stuff. So if you tune into the podcast, you'll end up hearing a lot of that, because I could dive in a lot on those things. But, meditation's like the dream state. And I have a dream journal as well. And I journal a lot of the dreams that come up, just like I journal a lot of my thoughts from meditation, because sometimes I'll have great ideas, and by the time I get downstairs, I've already forgotten what it was, So being able to journey the thought processes that come out of those clear, calm states of mind, that center in the eye of the storm, like you were kind of just alluding to, that is where some of the best clarity I've ever had comes from. And you sort of develop this like mental muscle of quieting that monkey mind and shoving out the things in your brain that, I got to do this and I got to do that. That muscle that you start to develop to push those thoughts and make them quieter and quiet the mind is also the same sort of mental muscle you use when someone extremely disrespectful comes up to you and says something bad or cuts you off in traffic, where maybe the version of me that was 27, 28 years old would have jumped out of that car and, badge in hand, and somebody would have been tossed. But that person is subdued because you just realize there's a different way to react and see the person. I've learned to I'm still developing it, but trying to see myself and therefore see God, source and creator, in every person, in every interaction, in every moment of my life. It's hard because your knee-jerk reaction kind of takes over sometimes. Someone gets you fired up enough where you're just like, let me tell you something. But then afterwards, you realize the divinity in everything that happens in your life. And I feel like it's come from those moments of calm. I don't know where I would be in my life if I never discovered meditation. So that's probably the biggest tool. But beyond that, it's opening yourself up to any and all concepts out there, not fitting yourself like, with certain religions. Like I wanted to find God at one point. You hear everybody who goes to their lowest points of life and they go and find God. Well, I was trying to find it, and I tried to find God in religion, and it didn't work for me. There was a lot of dead ends that I hit. Well, I'm like, this is good, but I don't agree with this one. On to the next religion. Well, this is good and this is good, but I don't agree with this. So, recently I've actually become what I've identified as an omnist, because it's the belief that there is no single religion that is truth, but there's truth in all of them. And I just recently developed the United Association of Omnism, because there was no formal centralized, maybe a few Facebook groups out there, but we're creating that and some things that come from it. But that open-mindedness toward all spiritual concepts and all people's views, I feel like every single one of them is a road back to the creator. And I feel like that's the purpose of why we're here. We were divided from that source when we came here, and eventually we're going to return to it. I think that the point of the game, the way you get to the end mark of the game board, is that you try and make that connection here while you're still here. And to do that, I think you've got to pay attention to literally every religion, every person, every interaction, because it's literally all part of source. And that has made life so much more interesting and fulfilling. I think between those two things, I don't know if there's anything else that really I could point to other than those, because life has just gotten so much more deep, meaningful, and rich because of those two things added to my life.
Wow. So much synergy with you, man. No, I completely agree. And it's awesome that I want to know more about this United Association of Omnism that you're working on, because I'd love to partner with you on that and see if we can do some things together, because that was a huge part of my journey. I went back to school, got a bachelor's in biblical studies and Eastern religion. I studied all of them, started even studying the cultures and the languages, and I realized, wait a minute, they're all saying the same thing, just from different cultural perspectives, utilizing different rituals. But at the core of it all, the message was the same. Sure, you had some radicals, in different belief systems, but at the end of the day, I always say love is my religion. Love is the highest frequency that you can flow in. Anybody can say, I'm a Christian, I'm a Buddhist, I'm Hindu. I say I'm love, and you have to see it in my life. If I say I'm a title of something, then I can be, I can fall, I can be stupid and act ignorant as a result of that something, and there's really no higher level of accountability. But if I hold myself to the accountability and the standard of love, then if I say my religion is love, then I have to show up that way. And that was just something I mentally did for myself. I just started saying, I am love. My religion, my belief system, the culture of my being that I bring to the world is love. And I think that's where most people are missing it, is they're trying to show up and they're claiming a name or a position or a title. Like, I pastored for 5 years before stepping away from the religious system, because through meditation, my spirit spoke to me and said, you can't use that system to change the system. You have to create a new one. Mm-hmm. And as I dove deeper into spirituality and meditation, I ended up teaching meditation for 6-7 years, 6.5, 7 years. And studying the law of attraction, the law of manifestation, and all these things, like really tapping into just how powerful am I right now in my life? How much power do I really have to ignite through the gift of choice in every single moment? But just like you said, seeing people not as they portray themselves, but seeing through the eyes of love. Like, I really got to that place where I said, I want to be able to see people through the eyes of love. And I gravitate more to the avatar of Jesus, the lifestyle, not the Christian religion. But if people ask me, like, what do you believe? And I say, I believe in the message of Jesus, which was the message of love, the message of seeking the kingdom, which he said was within you. And what's funny is that even when you look at somebody like Jesus, if you look, there's this book, it's called The Parallels of Buddha and Jesus, where they say practically the same thing. Buddha even goes into more detail in some areas. Mm-hmm. And I tell people all the time, like, Buddha came over 600 years before him, and yet people don't know that. Like, they don't realize that during that period of time where you hear nothing from him, 12 years old until he's 30, you hear nothing from him. A lot of scholars actually say he toured the East. Yes. He traveled the East and he studied. Jesus was more like a yogi than anything else. But you say that in religious circles, they don't know how to take that because they're too bound by their titles and their labels. But yeah, man, living free, living this life, and living freely is what it's all about. Life is not about fitting into a mold. It's about breaking free from the mold to understand that you are already free. And you get to choose how you live and experience this life, whether you want to experience a shallow life or a deeply meaningful life. Life is about the meaning that you give to it. And I think when we tap back into that deeper level of ourselves, as you have done, it transforms everything. But it doesn't just transform us. It transforms everybody that we're connected to and everything that we touch. So, brother, thank you for giving us this time. I feel like I'm going to have you back again, man. You've had me on twice, anytime. So it's only fair. We got to host a segment together, man. That's what we got to do.
Definitely.
And have some fun. But let everybody in podcast world know, how can they get in touch with you, Heath? Where can they find you at? Where are you hanging out?
So you can email me directly through the whole podcast platform. connect@livethislife.org is a direct email address to me, but pretty new pages on Instagram and Facebook. I'm not huge on social media, but I'm trying to be, but I'm definitely on there always getting the messages. So anybody can direct message me through either one of the Live This Life pages on Instagram and Facebook, and as well as TikTok. But there's plenty of ways to reach me and find me through those means. The website for everything that I'm doing is livethislife.org. So people can reach me through all those different means, and I've pretty much on every platform out there. Recently, just got pulled into Amazon Music, which is a huge accomplishment. I thought that was awesome. That
was awesome.
So,
I saw your story on that, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. That was pretty cool. So yeah, I'm available through all those different means, and I try and respond to people as much as I can. My inbox has gone through the roof lately. So if you do write, I will always respond. But it may take a little bit of time, but definitely. And I'm always looking for people. If people have amazing stories to share, kind of like the one I've shared with you today, if they have amazing, they got books, they have different things that they're trying to promote with themselves, and they want to get on episodes, they can hit me up and do the email and in the social media platforms as well. But easy to find me is just sometimes, like I said, I'm a busy guy with a lot of things going on, but I will always get back to people for sure.
Yeah. Well, guys, there you have it. Heath Cummings, the master of his own fate. And I'm so grateful to have had you on the show, my brother. I'm excited to see what's in store for you, what's coming. And I can't wait to see that new car you just bought. But
Me too.
Maybe you share it with me. I'll post a picture of it on my story just to celebrate you. So if you guys in podcast land want to see it, you can follow him. You can follow me, because when he gets it, I want to see it and I'll share it with you. But man, but this is what living this life is all about. And you are truly, I always say we are our brand. Yes. And to see you truly engulf that and embody that has just been a beautiful thing. And so it's an honor to have you on the show. I'm going to be in touch with you, man, because we got to talk. We've been saying this for a while. We got to put something together, because we have such a synergy. But guys, if you want to reach out to Heath, I know he just gave you all the information, but I'm going to post the links in the bio. If you don't find it, because I know on some streaming platforms, it doesn't include the links in there. I'll include it in the description, though. So if you guys want to reach out to him, you can reach out to him. Let him know what you thought about his interview. Let him know what you think about the growth. If you have questions, ask him questions. And like he said, his social media and everything is new because he has a lot going on. He's impacting a town. He's impacting change. He's not one of those people that spends hours on social media, but like me, he's getting better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But reach out to him. But listen, everybody, podcast land, I appreciate you for tuning into this episode, or this segment rather, of the Mastery 360. Tongue-tied. Sorry, guys. Mastery 360 segment and the Evolve Mastery podcast. And I'm looking forward to hearing your reviews, hearing your rating. Let me know what you guys thought about this podcast. Reach out to me. Well, listen, brother, I appreciate you being on the podcast. I'm going to let you go get back to your day. And I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody in podcast land thought about this podcast. So shoot me your messages. Shoot Heath your messages. Let us know what you thought. And we'll be catching you guys on the flip side. Stay tuned for further messages after this podcast ends. I got something special I want to share with each and every one of you. Love you guys. I'll be talking to you soon.
See you guys.
All right. I told you guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. As you can see, the synergy that Heath and I have is just amazing. And I have so many other guests that I'm going to be bringing on to the Mastery 360 segment. And I'm just really excited to just give you guys a few announcements. As I said in the beginning of this podcast, I have a new book that's out, and that is Warrior of Love, Speaker of Truth, a Decade Anthology. 10 years, 8 to 10 of my writings for the past 10 years within each year. And it's just an amazing journey to go back and read the things that I was saying, the revelations that I was having, the wisdom that was being gained and shared during my journey for the past 10 years. But Warrior of Love, Speaker of Truth, a Decade Anthology is now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's on Nook for Barnes & Noble right now. It's under review. We had some bleed issues with the cover, so we're correcting that, and we're getting that submitted hopefully within the next day or two, so it'll be available for print and on Nook for the ebook on Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. The ebook right now for the next 7 days is only 99 cents, and then it will be going up. And the print copy is $14.95. But listen, guys, So much has been happening. We look at the world, we see so many things that are transpiring, and I'm excited for this next phase of the Evolved Mastery journey as I introduce a new segment called Real Talk. For those of you who weren't with me from the beginning of my journey, almost 18 years ago, I had started not a podcast, but I used to record CDs because we didn't have YouTube and social media wasn't where it is now. And, there was no radio stations for people like me in the beginning. So I used to record this show called Real Talk, Revelations for the Next Generation. And I'm bringing it back, guys. A whole new flair, new level of wisdom, new level of growth, bringing real talk for real people, seeking real solutions to real problems. So make sure, if you're new to the podcast, subscribe, leave a review. And if you've been here before, still leave a review. Let the world know what you think about the podcast. But listen, I'm so excited for what's ahead. I'm also working on finishing up my new book. Guys, I got so much in me right now I'm trying to get out, but I'm working on the new book, Unbreakable. And now I get to, with this new book coming out, I get to take my time on the Unbreakable book. So this year, by the end of the year, it will be done. But listen, I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and I'll be talking to you soon. Peace.